All right. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the first episode of my podcast. A pilot episode. Exciting times indeed. Basically, hi, my name is Amil Khan, and welcome to Find the Real podcast, where I believe everyone has a story. So, in this first episode, in the pilot, I'm actually going to tell you three main things for today, right? Number one, why have I decided to come up with the podcast? What is this podcast all about? Number two, I'll tell you a little bit about Amil Khan. Who is this Amil Khan guy? Why should you listen to him, right? And number three, I'll also give you a little bit of expectations of what is it to come. What is the future of this podcast channel and what can you expect moving forward? So let's start with the first thing, right? So why am I doing a podcast? So here's the thing. I've actually been in the music industry for the past 20 years, playing in a band, recording a few albums here and there. I've also had a career in sales and marketing for the past 15 years. So, in a nutshell, I've actually, as part of my job and as part of my passion and hobby as being a musician, as you can imagine, I meet a lot of people on a daily basis, right? I meet guys in the sales and marketing firm. I meet retailer outlet owners. I meet musicians and things like that. And what I realize is I have a lot of random conversations with a lot of random people. And everyone, when you hear their stories, they actually have an interesting story to tell, right? So I'm talking about things like, imagine, right, in the part of me doing sales, I go and talk to a retailer outlet owner. And one of the stories that I can remember very clearly is, imagine this guy is a foreign worker. He's a Bangladeshi, right? He started working in the shop as a stock boy, right? Carrying stock and stuff. And next thing you know, he decides that, hey, I don't have any Bangladeshi products that I can get for myself or my community. He starts importing these products. Next thing you know, in a span of 3-4 years, boom, he's got like about 7 to 8 outlets all over KL, and this guy is driving a BMW 8 Series. 8 Series, huh? So it's very interesting that he can do something like that. Now, on a musical perspective, if I can think of an interesting story, I'll tell you a story that happened to myself, right? Imagine your first show outside of Peninsular Malaysia. You take a flight all the way to Kuching. It's part of the Adidas Street Ball Tour many years ago. Imagine, you go there, you arrive, and your guitar and your pedal board is not with you, right? The flight fella say, "Ayo, he went to another plane," right? So I'm waiting with no guitar, getting ready to go on stage. Organizer says, "Hey bro, you can use this Fender for a while." Imagine a metal band playing Fender. Very difficult. So next thing you know, 15 minutes before the show, somehow or other the airline managed to get my guitar, brought it to the stage, right? And 15 minutes before going on stage, I got the guitar. So basically, these are the kind of stories and tales that I would like to share with the listeners out there, right? The idea here is I want to document the stories, because if we don't document the stories and you don't listen to it, right, no one will know these amazing stories. Only the people who experience it or the people closest to them might know the stories. But for me, like I said, these stories are not just interesting. Like, these are stories that you can learn from, that you can take learning and improve yourself from these experiences. So that's kind of why I want to do this podcast, right? Sharing stories for us to learn for the betterment of our lives. Yeah. So again, that's the main reason why I'm doing this podcast. Sharing stories from everyday people for entertainment value, and as well as for us to learn and better ourselves. Now, the first part done, right? So let's talk about the second part. Who is this Amil Khan guy? Why should I listen to him, right? So basically, for me, there are three things I think that define my life, right? So I live my life with this principle. Now, imagine, if you can, a triangle. Yeah, a triangle. Now, this triangle, imagine if it's made with a rubber band, right? So if it's a rubber band, right, each point of this triangle can go in different directions, right? Can go longer, can go shorter. Now, the ends of these triangles are three parts of my life. One is self, about me, right? One is about my family, and the third one is about career, right? So at any point in time, right, it doesn't have to be equal. The focus on yourself, the focus on your family, the focus on your career, it doesn't have to be equal. At some parts in your life, you must focus on yourself more. At some parts, you must focus on your career more or your family more, right? But the most important thing is all three of these elements have to be in your life. So let's talk about self first. A few things that define who I am. Number one, I'm actually a musician. I mean, not a great musician, but a musician nonetheless. So I played for the past 20 years plus with this band called Dragon Red. This little band called Dragon Red. And I think what I'm proud about the band is the fact that number one, I write songs for the band, write music for the band. We've toured not just in Malaysia, outside of Malaysia as well. We won an award in 2007 for Best New English Artist. But what I enjoy the most is actually just going on stage, playing my music, and just getting a reaction from the crowd and getting people to acknowledge that, hey man, that's your song. It's pretty cool. So I mean that's the self-egotistical part of me but I really enjoy that part of music. So yeah, me as a musician. Now as a musician, if I talk about a few of the key memories that I have was, I remember we played for one event, Rock the World, in Stadium Merdeka. Right, so can you imagine, like, at that point we played a cover song. We played the song Blind by Korn. So when I played the opening riff, right, to see people from the top of the stands just suddenly like they move their heads up and they're like, dude, that's Korn, that's Blind. And they come running down and getting ready to go to the mosh pit. Like, that experience for me was the best experience in the 20 odd years I've been playing music right? So when it comes to me, so you've got the music part down. Second part about me is I like to eat right? I really, really like to eat. I mean, to maintain this size, I tell you, it's not easy, all right? You think people only need to work out to be healthy? No, bro, you need to eat also. Unfortunately, I think I'm eating a little too much But anywho's, I would literally drive to locations that's about maybe 2 hours away just to eat something that I haven't eaten before, and if it's yummy, I'll go there again. So that's the kind of character I am. During MCO, I've also picked up cooking a little bit, so I'm trying to learn to cook the things that I like to eat. A few weeks ago, I cooked a really mean chicken tom yum, really, really good. So yeah, I mean that's another part of me. The third part about me, when it comes to focusing on myself, is I'm a video game guy. So I love playing my handheld video games like the Steam Deck, retro gaming on handheld devices, playing games on my phone. So yeah, that's another aspect of me. So we go back to the triangle. So I've completed the self part of me. Now the second thing that defines me is my family. Now, when it comes to family, I've got a beautiful wife. This year we'll be married for 10 years. We've been together for 15 years. And through that relationship, we've got two wonderful children. I've got a boy, Kai. He is 6 years old. And I've got a daughter, Kara, who's turning 2 in September. And I tell you, being a dad really changes your perspective on life. Like for me, I mean, one of the most important things for me is to make sure that whilst I'm focusing on myself, I also want to make sure that my family is taken care of. You're selfless. You tend to want to do what's best for your kids, right? I mean, power be to you if you want to have kids or not. But for me, I'm happy, right? I enjoy where I am in my life. And, just coming home and seeing your kids after work or whatever is just such a wonderful feeling, right? I mean, my daughter, who's almost 2, the moment I come home and when I open the door and when she looks at me and she says dada dada, that feeling is something that honestly money can't buy, and I love it, right? When I'm sitting randomly like on the floor, on the carpet or whatever, then she just comes up to me and she sits on my lap, like for me that is so beautiful. And like my son randomly will make the silliest jokes, right? He, like, kids says the darnest things, and he's one of them. He'll just say like random things, and this guy is hilarious. He's a funny boy, and I love my family to bits. And my wife, such a patient person, enjoying what she's doing. She's a principal in a kindergarten, and totally loves what she does. She's so busy with work, but at the same time she makes time to spend with her husband and the kids, and she's always present with the family. So that's the second part about me. So 2 parts of the triangle, right? I've covered the self portion, I've covered the family portion. Now the third portion, career, right? So like I mentioned, I've spent 15 years doing sales and marketing. So on a career perspective, I started my career in this company called British American Tobacco. Started my career in the factory. Right, I was a management trainee in supply chain working in the factory. And one day, the operations director of BAT said, you know what, Amil, you talk too much. I think factory might not be for you. So I then joined the sales and marketing team and I totally fell in love. Like, my first project was designing something from scratch, right? Designing a product from scratch, the packaging of the product, all the way to citing that product in market and the go-to-market plan, right? And to see my product out there and to see consumers buy that product, for me, that was another thrill that I got, right? Next to being on stage performing in front of thousands of people, the second thing is creating a product from scratch and for it to be sold in market and consumers buying it and saying like, hey man, this product is awesome. So that rush was another amazing rush, right? So in BAT, I actually spent my career in multiple departments in marketing. I did sales, I did brand marketing, I did trade marketing, I did strategy, I did research, the whole gamut. And then what I realized was MCO happened. And when MCO happened, it was a little bit challenging. Like I mentioned about that triangle, right? Trying to balance focus on myself, balancing focus on my family, and focus on my career. That was very difficult, and it got to a point where I had a little bit of a health issue. At one point, I thought I had a heart attack. You know, heart was palpitating. I was having cold sweats. I rushed myself to the hospital, and yeah, I did the stress test. I did the ECG and stuff. The heart was fine, but it could have most possibly been something like anxiety driven. So that's when I realized, like, hey man, you know what? Take a step back. You know, there are, like I said, focusing on different portions in your life. There are parts in time where you might have to reduce the focus on career and focus a little bit on yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? So I decided to leave a 15-year career in BAT. Took some time for myself. You know, I zenned a little bit, focused a little bit more on my relationship with my friends, my family, my wife, and also focused on my personal health. Yeah. A few months later, I joined this company called Astro. You know, in Astro, I actually did a head of sales job where we were selling enterprise products to enterprise customers, right? And yeah, 1 year later in Astro, I realized that it's also not my calling in that particular organization. So yeah, then I've decided to leave that company as well, and looking for what else is out there for the future for me. So there you go, the three aspects of my life that I spoke about, right? Spoke about myself, my music, food, passion for gaming, spoke about my family, my wife, my 2 kids, spoke about my career, 15 years in sales and marketing, spent majority of my time doing tobacco with British American Tobacco, and the last portion of my career with Astro. And now let's go on to expectations of what you can expect in this podcast. So going into it, what I'm looking at is hopefully weekly consistent content, right? Because what I read somewhere that podcasts normally can only survive, the average podcast is only 7 episodes in. After that, the podcast dies. So for me, I'm targeting to be more than 7, a lot more than that. So that's what I'm looking at, right? Consistent podcast, consistent content, but more importantly, getting stories that are interesting for you to hear, right? Authentic stories, real stories by real people, right? Now, the type of guests that you can expect on this podcast, I would look at it as people with interesting careers, right? You want to understand, for example, what does a policeman do? What does a fireman do? Like, what do they do on a daily basis? What's their 9 to 5? What's a day in the life of a postman, for example, right? What are the challenges they face? What excites them? What motivates them to do what they want to do? So that's one kind of group of guests that will be on the podcast. The second group of guests will be people with interesting stories. Like I mentioned earlier, right? That Bangladeshi foreign worker who managed to open his whole conglomerate of Bangladeshi outlets and who now drives a mean BMW, right? For example. I'm also looking for people with interesting stories. Like, take for example, people who left a comfortable and cushy corporate job to pursue their passion. For example, those kind of people, those kind of stories, right? And it's always a happy story when people who leave this nice corporate job to do something they're passionate about, and then after that, their passion becomes self-sustainable for them and their family, right? So not only are they making money that's enough for them, they're also fully enjoying what they do. So those are the kind of stories and people that I'll be having as guests in this podcast, and hopefully getting insightful stories to share with each and every one of you. So what else can you expect in the future? Well, on a personal level, I'm looking at a journey of self-discovery for me. Yeah, I want to learn more from these stories, I want to not just learn, I want to appreciate the experience that people go to and take that learning to improve myself. Second thing also, on a personal level, I can talk a lot lah, but hopefully through this podcast, I develop skills of interviewing people, how to engage in engaging conversation. And yeah, again, the third part is a challenge for me to do something consistently. Sometimes you know how it goes, right? You have the willpower or the energy to do something, you do it for a while, after that you're like, it's okay lah, no need to waste time lah. But for me, I really want to try and do this consistently with the right energy and with interesting content, and basically just to share the stories out there. So now, in closing, right, I just want you guys to know that this podcast is a project of passion, right? Like I said, I honestly believe everyone has a story, and I want to find these interesting stories and share it with you. Yeah, I want to have real talk with real people. I want to cry with them, laugh with them, learn their stories, and also get them to share their stories so that their stories are documented for the public and for you to listen to, right? Learn from their experiences and possibly grow from them, and and to use those experiences to better our personal lives. So in closing, guys, if you have an interesting story, hit me up on my social media, or you can just drop me an email at findtherealpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, share with me your stories. We'll bring you in the studio, we'll share your stories, and we'll see where we go from there. So that's it for episode 1 of Find the Real Podcast with Amil Khan. You found out why I'm doing this podcast. You found out a little bit who is this Amil Khan fella. And you also get a little bit of an expectation of what is this podcast going to give you in the future. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, and looking forward to see you guys in the next episode. Peace.